Thanks for getting me out of there. What are you gonna do now?
After I've recovered the cryo drill, I'm coming back here to save Ferris.
But isn't Freeze gonna try to stop you?
With any luck. Alfred, what's the status of the XC suit?
I've just finished loading it into a drop container.
Good news. I'm on my way to my alibi to recover a stolen cryogenic drill. Have the Batwing drop it there.
It's on its way.
Hey, what's up everyone? Nick here. Welcome back to the Batman Arkham Origins Cold Heart DLC. We are moving on to part 2 of 2. So, I mentioned this in the first video, but it's a pretty short, well, I guess it's, in terms of DLC, it's kind of long, but in terms of the overall game, the DLC is anywhere from about an hour and a half to 2.5 hours long, and so this is going to be the second part of the entire thing. Now, earlier in the first video, I talked about how the one problem with this DLC is that there's a number of bugs, and right here, this is the first of the bugs. So you'll notice that as I'm flying around, I keep stopping to check my map, and then you'll see I zipped up to this rooftop here where there's 3 armed guys. I checked my map, and I realized I was in the wrong spot. So the problem with the bug here actually comes from the objective marker. So if you look at the top of the screen, you could see a green objective marker, and the problem is what will happen is the objective marker is not in sync with the game at this part. So for some reason, it's kind of hard to tell from the angle I'm at right now, but if you were to look up in the sky, you'll see Batman's symbol above the objective location, and the symbol is not above this location here. What ends up happening at this part for some reason is the game is telling you to go somewhere else where we did a previous objective instead of to where we need to go for the current objective. So it's a small bug, but it can definitely cause some confusion, especially if this is your first time playing. So on my initial playthrough, oh, real quick, here's a pretty cool cutscene. You can see that we have finally unlocked Batman's XE suit, which I assume stands for Extreme Environment. Pretty cool suit.
The thermal gloves should help you deal with most ice you encounter, sir.
Anyway, what ended up happening is the first time I played through, when I faced this little bug with the objective location marker, I quit the game and then reloaded it, and that seemed to fix the problem. I just got lazy and didn't want to do that for this playthrough, especially because I thought I would leave it in there so I can kind of explicitly show you what happens and how to fix that bug if you find yourself in that situation. Now you're going to come to this location right here, the My Alibi nightclub. If I remember correctly, and I might be forgetting something, but you do not need to go to this nightclub in the main game, but you can, because if I remember, in the main game there's a side quest where you take down this villain known as the Bird, and I believe you take him down in the My Alibi nightclub, or I think you have to go there for some reason. Either way, that's where we have to go now. You're going to drop down and you're going to see a couple regular goons, one of the guys with the freeze guns, and then you'll see this new type of enemy, at least new to the DLC, and that is the ninja enemy. Now, we did fight these guys in the regular game. There are also several incantations of them throughout the games. In Arkham City, they're just the League of Assassins members. In Arkham Knight, they're the Arkham Knight's assassins. So they're all the same enemies, just with different skins. But I do think, no, wait, no, this was not the first game. I'm getting confused with a couple different things. Anyway, go ahead. By the way, it's early that I'm recording this commentary, early in the morning, so I'm still a little bit tired. But anyway, go through this door here, and you're going to interrogate a familiar face.
No more.
You stole a cryogenic drill from Gothcorp.
Well, yeah, but it ain't here. Bigwood said to sell off the parts. It's in pieces.
Where are they?
I'll tell you. Just Don't drop me off a roof, okay?
Maybe next time.
Alright, so now we have our next objective. We have to find the pieces to the several pieces to the cryo drill. If you don't remember, the guy that we just interrogated, his name is Ricky Looselips, and he was actually in Arkham Origins. So he was the guy that near the beginning of the game we had to go to Jezebel Plaza to start to stop an arms deal, and Ricky is one of Penguin's guys that was running it, and we knocked him out and then hung him from over a building and then dropped him into a giant Christmas tree. And then later in the game, while we were in the GCPD, we found him in an interrogation room, and once again we had to talk to him. And so I thought that was kind of cool that they incorporated him into this game as well. Alright, so anyway, like I said, we have to find the several missing pieces of the cryo drill. The first one is going to be on this rooftop here. There's going to be 5 armed guys. Right off the bat, you can get 2 of them. And now these 3, they're all kind of standing up near each other, protecting the equipment. So I'm going to zip up here to this little rooftop and kind of just wait it out. And then while I'm waiting, I can use my gadgets. So I'll use my disruptor to disrupt their 2 weapons. And then there's only 1 guy left with a working gun. I'll just go ahead and throw a smoke grenade, take him out the old-fashioned way, and then the other 2 guys should cause no problem. And I think that's important to remember, that you know, stealth encounters, even though this is contradictory to the name, do not always have to be carried out in a stealthy manner. You know, so right there were 3 guys, and you know, I could have waited. I could have threw a sonic batarang to try to separate them. I could have done a lot of things, but usually for me the biggest thing is time. You know, I just want to get through the sections as quickly as possible because I feel like that's true Batman. You know, and it's one of the interesting things about the game, about any Arkham game that I've talked about before, is that there's always a lot of variability to how you play the game, and that's why people love these games so much. You know, some people, they like to impose these challenges just for themselves, where they get through every stealth encounter without ever being seen. A very noble challenge, and I respect it, but in terms of practicality, I like to do it the way I do it. I like to try to do it as quickly as possible, because I feel like that's how Batman operates. You know, if Batman was taking down a warehouse full of drug dealers and there was 20 guys in there, or okay, let's say 7, he wouldn't spend 30 minutes taking down these 7 guys just for the sake of never being seen. You know, he might take down the first 3 or 4 without being seen, and then the last 3 he would just swoop in and take them out real quickly. And so that's, I mean, I don't know, that's kind of like the justification I use for doing the play style I play. I feel like it's the most realistic to how Batman would do these things. But then, of course, you have to realize that Batman is a fictional character, so there's really no point in arguing, you know, how would he do this? In other words, I'm not going to go pick up a Batman t-shirt that says, "What would Batman do?" WWBD, especially because that B could be highly ambiguous. What would Batman do? What would Bono do? What would Barney do? The list goes on.
Alfred, I've assembled the cryo drill, but it requires some kind of superconducting fluid to operate.
Here it is, sir. An organic supercoolant used in an experimental lab run by one Victor Freeze.
As in Mr. Freeze.
It seems too great a coincidence to ignore. It says here that Ferris had Mr. Freeze's lab shut down.
If he's a disgruntled employee out for revenge, then this is about more than just stealing weapons tech.
Freeze's lab is under quarantine. Some kind of accident.
I'm on my way back to Gothcorp now.
So there you go. We just picked up a little bit of backstory information, potentially, on this new villain, Mr. Freeze. Now, like I said, I'm not going to be revealing his origin story. I want to leave that kind of spoiler free, so we'll be figuring out more about that in this video. But one of my favorite things recently, in case you guys don't know, in terms of the DC comic books, in 2011 they rebooted their whole universe under the guise of something called New 52. And even though New 52 introduced some really, really cool elements, overall it was received kind of negatively. And while I did like New 52, ultimately it came to a close a couple years ago. And so in 2016 they once again kind of restarted their universe. It's hard to explain because it's not really a restart, so I won't go in depth on that. But in 2016 they stopped the New 52 and they kind of restarted their comic book universe under the guise of DC Rebirth. And unlike New 52, Rebirth, pretty much people have nothing but good things to say about it, myself included. Rebirth is a huge success in my opinion, and I've really been enjoying it. I read a lot of different titles. When Rebirth first started, I was actually collecting every title, every single title. Batman, Superman, Green Lantern, Green Arrow, Wonder Woman, every single book that was published under Rebirth I was reading. But eventually money became the big factor there. You know, if you're reading every book, that adds up a lot every week. So what I ended up doing is now I only collect the books that are in the Batman family. So Batman, Nightwing, Red Hood, Batgirl, Birds of Prey, a couple others, but those are the main ones, and then a couple side stories that I like to read. But anyway, one of my favorite things is in a recent Batman comic book, the thing starts off with Batman talking, and he says that he does not believe, I think he's talking to Flash, I can't remember, but he says, I don't believe in coincidences. In my line of work, things are never a coincidence, and you know, that really applies right there. So Batman was talking to Alfred saying, hey, I need this supercooling or superconducting fluid, and Alfred's like, oh, you know, they're making it at GothCorp, the place that you've been kind of investigating, and it was developed by a scientist named Dr. Freeze. And then Batman says Freeze, as in Mr. Freeze, and so, you know, either that could be the biggest coincidence of all time, or we just found out a little bit more about Mr. Freeze. We found out that he is an employee for Ferris, working at GothCorp, and obviously working on cryogenic equipment. So now the story becomes why. You know, why is he working in that field, and why is he suddenly, you know, why did he suddenly decide to become a supervillain? And that's exactly, like I said, what we're going to figure out in this video. And one thing I do want to point out, just kind of a little preview, Mr. Freeze, in my opinion, has one of the greatest villain backstories in all of comic books, you know, more specifically in all of Batman villains. And I think for those of you who don't know it, I think you guys will really, find it interesting. And yeah, I don't want to use any other adjectives because that'll kind of give some things away. So I'll leave it at that. And like I said, we will be finding out more later on in about 10-15 minutes. So anyway, now we're going to, so we've been in this room before. In the last video we already did a stealth encounter in this room, but we have another one. And this one is the one that I was talking about in the first video. So I was talking about how this DLC does come with a number of its own achievements. One of those achievements, probably the most missable one, is to perform 3 ice wall takedowns, and you can only do that at this point in the game. This is the first location where you can actually do an ice wall takedown, and so I'm going to show you how to do them. In this room you can do 2 of them, which means you'll have to do one later on in the final boss fight. If you do not do all 3 before the DLC is over, you do have the option of roaming the town after you complete the mission, but there are no ice wall takedowns to perform, so you'll be out of luck. Now, so you have to do all 3 of them before taking down Mr. Freeze once and for all. Now you'll notice right off the bat what I did was this cool technique where you can throw the thermal batarang at the stalactites and they'll fall. crushing any enemies beneath. And so I did that right off the bat to take out 2 enemies with 1 shot. Now what I'm going to do is you'll notice these vantage points up here, they're frozen. And so you can throw thermal batarangs at those to thaw them out and make them, you know, able to use. And so like I said, you know, this is pretty much just a standard stealth encounter. It's actually not too difficult. But what you want to do here is you want to try to get 2 of those 3 ice wall takedowns out of the way, because if you, like I said, if you don't get that achievement during the main mission, then you'll have to replay the entire thing, because there is nowhere you can get the ice wall takedown in the main map. So anyway, here we go. I'm gonna take down this guy right here, and then you'll see to my left there's a vent, and you actually have to thaw the ice or break the ice to get through the vent. It's not the traditional metal grating. But anyway, now that I go through the vents, I'm kind of in this inner structure here, and you'll see this enemy standing conveniently right in front of an ice wall. So you'll be prompted to do the takedown trigger, do exactly that, and that's it. That's how you do the ice wall takedown. That is 1 of 3. And now the second ice wall is right here. Like I said, there's only 2 in this part of the map, so you'll want to make sure to use both of them. And so, again, you know, I could have just taken these guys down as quickly as possible, which is what I normally would do. But I wanted to make sure I got these ice wall takedowns. So now I'm just going to stand here, and I'm going to wait a couple seconds and hope that this enemy gets close enough, but unfortunately he does not. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to utilize the sonic batarang, because I don't want to just sit here waiting for something to happen that might not ever happen. So I'll throw a sonic batarang right in front of the ice wall, and that will lure over an enemy, hopefully. The sonic batarang in every game, sometimes it's kind of buggy, sometimes the enemies won't hear it. It usually has to do with if the enemies are currently talking. Like if the enemies are saying something, they might not hear it. And so right here you see I threw it, and I was starting to get worried thinking that no one heard it, but then luckily this poor guy right here did hear it, and so I'll take him out to finish my second ice wall takedown. One of those guys saw me and he started shooting at me, but luckily I had enough time to just easily get out of the way. And there you go. So that is 2 of the 3 ice wall takedowns needed to complete the achievement. The last one we'll get later on during the final boss fight of the game. So now this just becomes your average takedown. So there's a couple guys left. We'll take them out the good old-fashioned way. So there's a frozen tank you can use. As always, that's a really good way to take out an enemy. So since he's frozen in place, I'll swoop down on this guy. Take him out. Now the third guy is going to come over because he heard the commotion. So I'll wait for that to finish. And all I'm doing here is I was just making sure that there was no other ice walls in the area, which there aren't. So I'll go ahead and take out this guy now. It's kind of funny, he's standing right next to the guy I just took out. And now it's 1 guy left, and you can see that he has just thawed out completely from the frozen tank that I shot at him. So now I'll just swoop around and get ready for my next attack. And again, I was just kind of looking around, making sure that there was no third ice wall anywhere, because I wasn't sure. I didn't use an achievement guide for this one, so I didn't know. I didn't know if I was doing it correctly or not. Anyway, here we go. Take down the third guy with a nice ledge takedown. Sorry, buddy. And we're good. So now we can continue on. We're getting close to the boss fight, but before we get to that, we're gonna have a big detective scene, and it's going to be this detective scene that ultimately tells us what we need to know about who Mr. Freeze is. And it's kind of similar to the one in the main game, where we find out who Black Mask is and like what's been going on. is you'll do the detective scene, and then as he's doing it, he'll be talking. But then afterwards, there'll be a explicit cutscene which talks about what Batman learned from doing the detective encounter.
I'll need to evacuate this lab of cryovapor before the lockdown protocol on this door is disengaged.
So anyway, just throw 2 thermal batarangs at those 3 thermal batarangs. That will clear out the room. And now we can make it into the lab area.
There's more going on here than a simple accident. This security guard's skin has the same blue coloration as Freeze's. I should set up the crime scene.
Alright, so here we go. This is the crime scene, and then keep in mind, after this crime scene, we'll finally learn who Mr. Freeze is and why he's doing what he's doing. First, scan this guy.
Data analysis indicates that he died from heat stroke, but the control room doesn't show signs of overheating. This is some kind of crystallized chemical residue. Traces lead back into the lab.
Alright, so now just follow the trail to the next part of the lab. You're gonna have to throw did I just say thu? You're gonna have to throw 2 You're gonna have to throw 2 thermal batarangs.
I should scan for more evidence.
And then you'll scan the end of the trail right here for your next piece of info.
2 men struggled. One of them ran out of the lab. That would be the dead security guard I found.
Alright. So now you'll see these 2 prints on the window. Go ahead and scan those, and that will recreate another part of the crime scene.
These palm prints are a match for Victor Freeze. He must have watched the security guard die.
What a criminal. Alright, so now go ahead over to Mr. Freeze's desk, and you'll see his setup.
Freeze scavenged what he needed from various prototypes to build himself a super-cooled survival suit.
So now the question becomes, why does he need a super-cooled survival suit? So you can check this little explosion over here.
Extreme pressure built up inside the tank when ice sealed these outtakes. It appears that this guard was frozen by the cryovapors from the resulting explosion.
And for some reason, I got disconnected from Xbox Live in the middle of my
The
recording.
evidence suggests the guard was frozen before the tank ruptured, perhaps by Freeze's cryocannon. These DNA traces are a match for Victor Freeze. Spatter analysis suggests a blunt impact. Someone assaulted Freeze with a weapon. The cannon was knocked over and fired. When the tank exploded, it released a plume of cryochemicals. The plume enveloped Freeze and the guard, but the shockwave knocked the assailant clear. I need to find that weapon. It may have evidence I can use to identify the assailant.
So now we see that Mr. Freeze might have been a victim. Someone came into his lab and assaulted him with a weapon. So who is that?
DNA analysis confirms the gun was used to bludgeon Victor Freeze, and fingerprint analysis shows Ferris Boyle. It was Ferris.
So Ferris Boyle, this guy that just won an award at the beginning of the DLC, the head of GothCorp, apparently.
Something was wheeled through this fluid, possibly a gurney. The fluid must have frozen almost immediately for these tracks to have been preserved.
So guys, what is in that gurney? That will be the tell-all for this backstory. Here you go.
Odd. Freeze was secretly doing research on Huntington's chorea. But this is a cryogenic weapons lab. The test subject was Nora Freeze. Now I know what happened here. Boyle hired Victor to help advance the secret cryoweapons program within GothCorp. In exchange, Boyle agreed to devote GothCorp resources to finding a cure for Nora's Huntington's. But Boyle was more interested in how Victor had managed to put Nora into cryostasis. When Victor realized that Boyle had no intention of following through on their deal, he decided to do the Huntington's research himself. But Boyle didn't like that. The cryochemical cocktail altered Victor's metabolism, as well as the guards. Boyle escaped ahead of the plume and had the lab quarantined. Victor survived, but he knew that leaving the supercooled lab would kill him. So he built himself a suit and utilized an organic supercoolant to keep his core temperature sub-zero. All this violence. He's just trying to save his dying wife. The supercoolant Victor uses in his suit is the same fluid I need for the cryo drill.
So there you have it, guys. That is Mr. Freeze's backstory, and it's one of my favorite ones because it's just, and this sounds bad, but because it's just so deep, it's so tragic. You know, a lot of Batman's villains, like look at Scarecrow or Bane. You know, Bane had a very tough childhood, and when I say very tough, I mean there's nothing compared to it. But he could have, you know, he didn't need to become the supervillain that he became, but he did. And then you look at someone like Scarecrow. Scarecrow just, you know, likes causing people fear. That's just what he wants to do. And so, you know, a lot of these villains, they don't really have motives. They just cause evil for the sake of causing evil. Mr. Freeze, you can see that he's, you know, he's just a victim. He really is. He's a scientist that was working hard to save his wife from a disease she has. And he has her, you know, placed in cryostasis. And then things just don't go his way. And like I was saying, you know, the backstory for Mr. Freeze, it changes, you know, whether you're watching a cartoon or reading a certain comic book or whatever, but the core of it is always the same. The core is always that Mr. Freeze is a scientist working to save his wife. Something goes wrong, and he ends up becoming the villain that he is. But yeah, it's a sad backstory, and one thing I am excited for is I think this is the first time it's ever happened, but in Arkham Knight, there's a DLC mission that I'm going to be bringing to the channel later, and it will actually show kind of the conclusion of Mr. Freeze's story arc with his wife, and I think you guys will really enjoy that. I thought it was a lot of fun. And if you also remember, Mr. Freeze was a villain in Arkham City, and we heard him mention Nora and how he was trying to save her. So if you remembered that from Arkham City, you probably already knew some of his backstory, but I didn't want to mention it just to be safe. Anyway, now that we've gone through that giant ice wall, without saving Penguin, mind you, we're going to continue down this hallway, and that will lead us into the final room of the DLC, where we take on Mr. Freeze once and for all in kind of a long boss fight. It actually ends up turning into like a 10-minute boss fight. But anyway, before we start that fight, there is going to be a very brief cutscene between Batman, Freeze, and Boyle.
Victor, you have to let him go.
I'm taking my wife. You can't stop me.
I know the truth, and so will the police. Boyle will face judgment for his crimes.
It was an accident. You don't know what you're talking about. What?
Nothing matters. Do you understand? Nothing but my Nora.
You've endangered lives all over this city. Nora would never have wanted this.
No. What she wants is to live a long life in the warmth of the sun. Her hand in mine. And because of him, she'll only feel the icy touch of a man whose emotions run as cold as the blood in his veins.
Where are the rest of you? Get in here and honor our bargain.
Alright guys, here we go. It looks like even though we gave Mr. Freeze an option to surrender, he is not going to do so. So, this boss fight is a little complicated. Mr. Freeze is going to be at the center of the map, and he's just going to walk around in a circle looking for Batman. There's going to be a number of armed thugs in here, and what the game kind of wants you to do is it wants you to take out all 5 thugs, and then there's these 3 generators that you have to kind of overheat. And every time you overheat a generator, more enemies will show up. So like for example, if you take out all 5 enemies and then you overheat one of the generators, more enemies will show up. So what I like to do instead is I like to just go straight to work on the generators without even worrying about taking out these guys. If one of them falls in my path, then sure, I'll take them out. But here you can see I only took out 1 guy, and then I just disabled the first of the 3 cryogenic reactors. Now there's 2 left. Another enemy just came into the area to make it 5 total. And now we just basically rinse and repeat the process. We swing around this room looking for the next reactor, and then like I said, you know, you don't want to take out these 5 guys right now because it just becomes too much. You take out 5 guys, you destroy a reactor. Then you take out another 5, destroy a reactor. It's just too much. All the while, keep in mind, Mr. Freeze is up there looking for you, so it really makes it hard to remain in stealth. So what I find easiest to do is you can see that the second generator is over there to my right. So I'm going to wait until Mr. Freeze turns his back. So you can see he's just now about to turn around. There he goes. There's a goon right by the reactor, but I have enough time to do this, so I'm going to drop down and get to work on the second reactor. You'll have to hold down the prompt button for quite a bit of time. Mr. Freeze will have time to show up and start aiming his weapon at you. But if you time it right, you should have just enough time to disable the reactor and get out of there. And now you can see there's only 1 reactor left, and so that's kind of what saves so much time with this strategy, is you don't have to waste time taking out all these regular goons. You just go straight to work on the reactors. And again, you know, if an enemy happens to just, you know, fall right in front of you, then sure, you can take them out. But the point is, don't go out of your way to do so. Now right here, I'm going to go to work on the 3rd reactor, and you're going to see that I actually messed up. I let go of the button too early. I thought I had it, but so here you see Mr. Freeze, he froze me with like a split second left before I was able to disable the reactor. So that's why you really have to time these correctly, and that's probably the most difficult part of this first section. So now what happens is, now that he spotted me, I'm just going to swing around for a bit so that he loses me. And eventually, once he's no longer looking for, or once he no longer sees me, I'm going to swing back over and get in place to disable that last reactor. So you can see there's 2 thugs waiting nearby, but once again, I don't think I'm going to have to take them out to do this. So here we go. He's going to turn around one more time. This time I'm going to wait another second just to make sure I have enough time on this second go at it. And here we go. This one should work, and that will complete the first stage of the boss fight and bring us into the second and final stage of the boss fight.
Let's see how well you do when the air freezes in your lungs.
Alright guys, so now we go to the second stage of the boss fight. You're going to be frozen temporarily. Mr. Freeze is now going to drop down to the main level. And you'll notice that the enemies are still in the area. So those 5 enemies that I didn't take out in the first section, they're still going to be in the area. But as you're going to see, it's actually easier to take them out now. So the hardest part is just getting away. So I'm going to drop a smoke pellet, take out this guy while I can, and then just get the hell out of here. So here we go. Zip up. And now we're good. Now we're basically in the clear. I'm going to zip around until Mr. Freeze loses my location. And so now one thing you're going to want to make sure you do is remember the achievement calls for getting 3 ice wall takedowns. So far we've only gotten 2, so you're going to want to make sure you get that 3rd one at some point in here. But you'll notice that from the ceiling there are a lot of these frozen stalactites, and you'll notice the health bar in the top right corner. That is Mr. Freeze's health bar. And so this is very similar to the Arkham City Mr. Freeze boss fight, where Mr. Freeze would keep adapting. You know, every time you injured him, he would adapt, and you had to find a different way to injure him every time. Fortunately for this case here, that does not happen. You can completely take down Mr. Freeze using nothing but these frozen stalactites. So basically, wait for him to step under one. If he doesn't step under one, then you can always throw a sonic batarang and try to lure him under one. But there are a lot of them to work with, and I believe they regenerate. So even if you don't get it on your first go, you should be fine to get it later on. And now in this part here, once again, you don't have to take out these armed guards, but you might as well. It makes your life a little easier. So you can see this guy right here. I'm going to go to work taking him out. I'm going to try to get that last ice wall takedown, but I wasn't quick enough. That would have been a good spot to do it, but unfortunately, I just wasn't fast enough. So I'm going to take out this guy just for the sake of it. And now there are 2 enemies left. There is one regular goon, and then there's Mr. Freeze himself. And again, like I said, the way we're basically going to be taking out Mr. Freeze is just use the frozen stalactites over and over again. And it ends up becoming kind of a boring boss fight, in my opinion. I actually don't really care for it, but, you know, it is what it is. Now, I use the frozen stalactite there to take out the enemy. And so now I still need one more ice wall takedown. You can see there's another enemy over here. Now I'm pretty sure I get the achievement in this recording, but what might have happened is maybe I got it and then restarted the checkpoint and then re-recorded this. I don't remember. I'm pretty sure I get the achievement here. So at some point I should do an ice wall takedown, and I think you can even do it on Mr. Freeze, but you might want to do it on a regular goon just to be safe. So here we go. Since Mr. Freeze is on the other side of the map, I'll throw a sonic batarang over here to lure this guy over. There we go. That is the 3rd ice wall takedown. And you'll notice there's a lot of ice walls in this room, so you could potentially get the achievement. You could get all 3 in this room, but there's the achievement I was looking for. And now that I've unlocked that, I can go to work against Mr. Freeze. So you can see you can't actually sneak up behind him because he's kind of like exhausting this super cooled fluid or super cooled gas, so you can't really sneak up behind him. So as I mentioned, I'm just going to keep using these stalactites, and oftentimes they're really close to each other, so you can hit him with numerous ones at the same time. One little trick is aim your batarang at the stalactite, and it will actually tell you if he's underneath it or not. So it'll say like one enemy in range or something like that. But here you can see. So now that I've taken out all 5 enemies, it just becomes a matter of taking out Mr. Freeze, but it looks like another enemy just came into the area. But at this point, you know, so here come the next batch of enemies, kind of like how I was saying, they'll just keep regenerating after you take out all 5. But I'm not even going to worry about them. I'm just going to focus on taking out Mr. Freeze. Otherwise, you're just going to waste a lot of time taking out the little guys, and it will make this boss fight even more miserable. So just wait for Mr. Freeze to step under a stalactite, and then that's all you really need to do. And the biggest thing, you know, is just waiting. Just waiting for him to get in the necessary position. And so yeah, at the end of the day, I really didn't care for this boss fight for a number of reasons. I didn't like the repetitive way you need to take him down. I also didn't like the map. I don't care for the map, but the biggest thing is I don't like the infinite supply of enemies. That's always my biggest pet peeve in boss fights. Like, you know, I always hate when games give you regular enemies to take out during the boss fight. That's bad enough. It's even worse when they make that supply infinite. In my opinion, I don't like that. Alright, So there you go. For some reason, I don't know why this is, you don't even need to reduce his health fully. You only need to get it about 3/4 of the way down, and then eventually that little scene there will trigger, telling you that you are now done with the boss fight. So the last thing to do, the enemies are all now going to be frozen in place. Mr. Freeze is going to be up there at a control panel,
Take him from below.
and you need to get underneath him. So the way you do that, nothing too difficult here, except I think I did actually get lost right here at one point. I couldn't jump up there, so I'm gonna, you know, use the stairs. But anyway, oh, the mine got me. Anyway, I'm going to just sneak under him right here, and that will trigger the end of the boss fight and the end of the DLC. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the end.
I should have just killed him. Him and the boy.
Thanks for doing the heavy lifting, Batman. But you shouldn't have stuck your nose in my business. And here I thought I was going to have a problem explaining what happened in your lab. I mean, the police are never going to look at me after what you did. And with this bat freak dead, there won't be anyone left to say otherwise.
Cryogenic containment failing.
And that just leaves you.
Please, you can save him. You just have to bypass the cryo.
Victor, she died. I'll keep you alive long enough to see her go. No!
Cryogenic containment.
Take a seat, humanitarian.
Cryogenic containment restored.
I'm sorry, Victor. I can't give you peace, but I can give you justice.
And there you have it, guys. That is the Cold, Cold Heart DLC. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Another walkthrough bites the dust, and I will see you in the next one.